Wonderful.
I
Well,
can hear. Thank
we'll
you.
do a roll call in just a second. I just want to make sure you could hear and that we were copacetic in order to start. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you and good morning to everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order at 9:30. And I want to thank folks for being in the audience today, as well as we have 3 members joining remotely. Chair Wheelock, because she is remote, has asked me to chair the meeting, and so I will do so, but when we do the chair's report, it will come from the chair of the committee. So looking forward to that. And also, I'm just as a reminder, because we have 3 members remote, we are going to do roll call, not just here for at the beginning, but throughout as we have any votes or formal actions. So Kayla, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Member Baker.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Carlson.
Here.
Vice Chair Norton.
Present.
Member Rybeck. Member Tyne.
Here.
Chair Wheelock.
Here. Wonderful. Thank you, Pam.
Secretary Williams.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. That's what I was going to say. We have a quorum, and I'm very pleased about that. We do need an formal approval of the agenda.
Move approval, Carlson.
Second, Williams.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Kayla, would you call the roll?
Member Baker.
Approve.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
Member Carlson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Norton.
Aye.
Member Rybeck. Member Tyne.
Aye.
Chair Wheelock.
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, of course, is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Kayla, would you call the roll?
Member Baker.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
Member Carlson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Norton.
Aye.
Member Rybeck. Member Tyne.
Aye.
Chair Wheelock.
Aye.
Secretary Williams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Wonderful. We've now reached that point where we have public comments, and so I'm going to open that period and remind the community members that want to speak that they should keep their comments to about 2 minutes. And if you would state your name when you come to the microphone, we would appreciate that. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board this morning? Mr. Kriesel.
I'd like to, this is hot, yes. I'd like to thank the DMC.
Mr. Kriesel, could you formally state your name?
John Kriesel,
Thank you.
22 3rd Street Southwest, Rochester, Minnesota. 5th generation on both sides of the fence, committed to the enhancement of this city of Rochester, and look forward to the what it can be and what it will be. So I'd like to thank the DMC as well as elected officials, their staffs, moving forward with providing committed to providing an economic success of DMC development, its district, and enhancement of the patient, visitor, residential, and employee experience. However, this is no small task, as all of you know. You've been committed to it for many, many years. We've been here collectively for quite a few years in trying to push this forward. I think we're on the precipice of making it happen. Certainly for Mayo Clinic and the medical community to be able to have an investment of approximately $5 million, or $5 billion, big difference. Big difference. It's important to know where to put the decimal point. That I would say half of 1% to $5 billion is $25 million. I would hope to be able to embrace one of the pillars that everyone has approved, which is basically that of preservation. That now that the city council has done a yeoman's job in having an historic district, that approximately that 20, I'd like to see that $25 million is available to the historic district to be able to enhance the experience for the visitors here, help create the charm that is needed and that experience. That said, I remain committed to the city of Rochester. I own a building, 1874 building in downtown Rochester, and I've had a business in that location for over 40 years. I will share something rather exciting with you as it relates to that particular building. Prior to that brick building being started to be built in 1872, completed in 1874, on that ground is the ground where W.W. Mayo had his first and only office for himself. That wooden building then burned down, and the building that now that I am the caretaker of is a brick building, and I'm very proud to have it now and in the future to enhance the experience that everybody will coming to this state, national, and international experience for people in healthcare, and I hope more to come in other diversities and businesses. I thank you all very much.
Thank you for those comments.
Can I,
We might want to note that we have R.T. Rybeck, one of the members that has arrived. Hopefully the travel wasn't too bad on your way. Do we entertain comments at this point, Kayla?
The record will reflect that Member Rybeck is here, and we can see if there are any further public comments. Or Member Rybeck, did you have a question?
I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to address historic preservation and the great move the council and mayor made on that later. I think we have a chance
it on
later
the
in
agenda.
meeting. Okay,
Yes,
good.
absolutely.
So, appreciate that. We're going to talk about that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. Are there any other members from the public that wish to speak at this time? Mr. Stead.
Good morning, Team DMC. Loringstead, fifth generation Rochester, but only on one side, so he's got me on that. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming to our city, trying to enhance it and make it the best thing ever. My unique perspective is 5 generations here, but in addition, live in the Berkman Hotel and residence in Rochester. 31 different countries are there, and they are coming to the Rochester community to get health care. And everything you can do downtown and around our city to enhance their experience helps flow of good sense and monies and everything to around the world. So thank you for all your decisions you're going to be making. Please be very discerning in making the best choices you can to make Rochester the best spot it can be. Miracle City. Thank you for making it happen.
Thank you very much for those comments. Is there anyone else from the community that wishes to make a comment? Seeing no one come to the microphone, we'll close public comments, and it is now time for the chair's report. And Pam, if you have your mic on, you can give your chair's report at this time.
Thank you, Member Norton. It'll be a challenge, I think, both with my internet connection and with the feedback that I hear between my comments and hearing it then again in your room, but I'll do my best. I want to first say that I am pleased to appoint Brian Anderson, and Brian is the City of Rochester's new finance director, as our assistant treasurer. And if Brian is in the room, I'm not sure if he is, but if he could stand so that great. So our members can see you. We want to welcome you, Brian, and I'll also point out to the members that Brian's biography is in your materials for this board meeting. On an interim basis, Aaron Parrish, one of the city's deputy administrators, filled in as our assistant treasurer, and we also want to take this opportunity to thank Aaron for providing that service to the DMCC. It has been our practice, as you know, the last several years, to use the first meeting of the year to host a working session with members of the City Council, County Board, and EDA Board. This year, that session will be held after our May meeting. The details for that will be shared with the board and the public in coming weeks. Next, I would add that we also directed the EDA staff to publish a request for proposal for legal services, much as we have recently done with issuing an RFP for audit services. Every number of years, it is probably good practice to request a response from interested parties about providing that service. It's not to say that we intend or expect to make any changes. McGran Shea, both Kayla currently and the legal team before Kayla have provided excellent service, but we also want to make sure that we are up to speed on what the market rates are and that we consider responses. And so you will hear more about that. That RFP is available on the city and the DMC websites. And I will add that also recently signed contract with CLA for the audit services. So we are on track and proceeding, and I thank you for the opportunity to give the chair's report remotely, and I turn it back over to Member Norton.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. I do not believe Brian's bio is in our packet today, but it could be made available if anyone would like to see it. Is that acceptable?
Certainly.
Okay. All right. So please let me know, or the chair know, and we'll get it for you. We're moving on to the consent agenda, and we have two items, the DMCC 2023 budget, a year-to-date update, and B, the EDA 2023 budget encumbrance request. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Kayla, would you call the roll, please?
Member Baker,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Carlson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Norton,
Aye.
Member Rybeck,
Aye.
Member Tyne,
Aye.
Chair Wheelock,
Aye.
Member Williams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you. On the agenda next is the annual report to the legislature. We do have a resolution, Resolution A, in your packet, and I'm going to ask Kayla to take a few moments to describe that for us.
Certainly. Good morning, board members. As you know, by statute, we are required to submit an annual report. It is a joint report from the DMCC and from the City of Rochester. It must be submitted by February 15th of each year. And it's always good to bear in mind that the leadership that receives this report, some are very familiar with the DMC initiative and others may not be. So we're trying to address all audience members here. In terms of what the report must include, the statute sets forth 5 elements, and they are there on the screen to address these topics. And so the draft report that is before the board today starts on the board packet, page 13. It provides some highlights of the 2023 year, including the tremendous announcement of Bold, Unforward, Unbound in Rochester. It also highlights the private investments through 2022 of over $1.46 billion. And the 5 specific elements that are required by the statute are then covered in the enclosed report, and it's in the board packet starting on page 15. And it includes updates on significant projects, including Discovery Walk, the Riverfront, Soldiers Field, Link BRT, and on and on. And then at the back of the report, there are a series of exhibits, including as Exhibit A, a map of the development district noting the location of key projects. There is a summary in Exhibit B of key projects, as well as the certifications to and from deed and the materials required by statute. And those are found in Exhibits C, D, and E. And so before the board this morning is, as Vice Chair Norton noted, Resolution A, it's on page 10 of the board packet, and it is before the board for review and approval. And I note that the City Council will also consider the draft report at its February 5th meeting. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's worth noting the need for perhaps a more descriptive report than in the past. As time passes, the legislature has changed dramatically, and those that were there when it was approved have little knowledge of this particular item. And so I really appreciate that you're taking the time to do the informational piece as well as give that update. So thank you for that. I think it'll be helpful. Members, do you have any questions about the report itself?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just curious, just in terms of the turnover in the legislature and new faces and voices there, a new commissioner at DEED, I think as of the beginning of this year, have staff had a chance to brief the new commissioner and or any other visits, just kind of at a higher level, just to kind of re-ground folks in what we're doing here?
I think that's a good question. It looks like Patrick Sieb is going to step forward and answer that.
Thank you, and good morning. Excellent question, Mr. Williams. Yes, in fact, we have hosted the Commissioner of DEED shortly after his appointment. I think the mayor participated, Council President Carlson participated, many members of our community participated in a day-long visit to Rochester. We have also joined him in our business development work. Mike from our team and myself on several occasions, and we are a member of their ongoing, several of their ongoing work groups that he's involved with. So we've spent quite a bit of time with the new commissioner. Likewise, we do work closely with legislators in various conversations and roles, so we have tried to keep legislators current to this work as well.
Great, thanks.
Wonderful. Are there other questions of anyone online? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. This is our one formal vote in the packet today, so I need a formal motion and second. So moved. So moved. Mr. Reddick?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? Seeing none? We have to do roll call.
We do.
There we go.
Member Baker,
Aye.
Member Campbell,
Aye.
Member Carlson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Norton,
Aye.
Member Rybeck,
Aye.
Member Tyne,
Aye.
Chair Wheelock,
Aye.
Member Williams.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. It is now time for the EDA Board President's comments, and so we would like to welcome Dr. Clark Otley, President of the EDA Board of Directors, to join us. Here he comes. Good morning, Dr. Otley. Would you like to make some comments?
Thank you very much, Mayor Norton and members of the board. Delighted to be with you this morning. During your September board meeting, we reviewed the work plan and capital improvement plan that was developed in conjunction with the city and multiple stakeholders for your review. At that time, we kind of foreshadowed that there might be some big things on the horizon or just over the horizon. Well, the earth has turned, and that horizon has allowed us to see a couple of really exciting projects that are on our precipice. And so 4 months later, we have some amazing opportunities, and we really need to work together to think about how we can maximally benefit our state, our city, our county, our community, our citizens, and most importantly, our patients, which we will all be someday. And so in November, as has been widely reported, Mayo Clinic announced a large private investment in the state of Minnesota. In fact, the largest investment in the history of Minnesota. That program is called Bold Forward Unbound in Rochester and involves a conceptualization of the future of healthcare that is embodied in space, technology, people, and processes, working true to Mayo's mission of multidisciplinary collaborative care to transform the future of healthcare. It's very exciting. We're working hard on envisioning exactly what it will be and bring it together in concrete forms. The space will involve over 2 million square feet of cutting-edge space with a price tag of more than $5 billion with a B. To begin to get our heads around what this involves and the magnitude and what it will take, the EDA team will dedicate the metrics portion of the May meeting to thinking about the estimated impacts of Bold Forward Unbound, particularly on the construction trades in this area. Additionally, in October, the state of Minnesota was allowed to or gained approval for a Minnesota MedTech 3.0 grant proposal, which was submitted to the federal EDA, focused on smart medical technology. We have with us, and I'm looking very much forward to Mr. Peter Frosch, CEO of Greater MSP, who will describe that grant in more detail. I can promise you that the DMC EDA is all on board with this and have made major contributions to the state grant proposal, which is very exciting and positions Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota, and the state of Minnesota as the leading med tech hub in the country. EDA board members, Bobby Dressen and Dennis Dolan have been very heavily involved in this through their work with Mayo Clinic, Medical Alley, and Greater MSP, and we're very grateful for their role in guiding what is a very complex proposal with over 150 stakeholders to its final positioning. I also want to express significant appreciation for Chris Shad, our Director of Business Development at DMC EDA, who has worked tirelessly behind the scenes above and beyond his day job to try to get Rochester representation and ideas and the best of our technology incorporated into this seminal grant. In order to prepare Rochester for this incredible moment, our dynamic city administrator, Allison Zelms, will join us today to discuss how the city is planning to proactively embrace these opportunities and responsibilities in a very effective way, no short order. The DMC EDA is looking forward to partnering with you in enacting your vision for these opportunities as we move forward. We're very appreciative for your guidance on these complex issues. I would finish by saying this is an incredibly exciting time to be a citizen, a resident, and a worker in the city of Rochester and in the state of Minnesota, and we're very much looking forward to your considerations today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for that report, Dr. Otley. It is an exciting time in Rochester, and I think everyone at this table appreciates that very much. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but if not, we will go on. We have kind of a tight timeline here, so we'll excuse you, and I don't know if you're going to stay or head back to work, because I think you have another job too.
Madam Chair.
Member Ryback.
Just one quick comment, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I did want to just put a marker down where Mr. Otley you talked about the workforce and especially those who are building this project. There's an outstanding opportunity to partner with us to not only look at a training program over here and a construction project over there, but I'd love to see you challenge us to see if what tools we could use to help build that pipeline of workforce, which is going to, especially in the construction industry. And I would like us to be more than a passive partner in that. We've been looking for a long time at a way to get at that, and I think this might be the moment.
Thank you, and that does dovetail nicely with some initiatives we have here in Rochester working on the Global Mayor's Challenge and some federal funds targeted directly at workforce. So it is indeed perhaps that time we could work together. So thank you for that. We are going to try to stay on schedule here, so we're a few minutes behind, but not bad. If Patrick would like to talk a little bit about metrics, we welcome you back to the table.
Thank you, members. You have asked that each meeting we bring to you this agenda item called metrics, where we talk about the 5 goals we have as an organization that you've set up. And we look at one of them and we sort of unpack how are we doing against that, with an eye towards not only where we might be successful, but where we are have weak spots or soft spots that we might want to be concerned about or want to bring to your attention. And so today, we are bringing the topic of the second goal, attracting private investment, so leveraging the public investment to attract future $5 billion of private investment to Rochester. So I've asked Mike Flynn to join me in this presentation, and Mike, I'll let you
Sure.
tee it from here.
Excellent. Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to run through about 10 slides at which the end of we hope to have a little bit of conversation about potential paths to move forward. So as Patrick mentioned, there are 5 articulated goals in the DMC development plan. You see them there. We are intending to talk about the second one, which is to leverage all of the public investments DMC makes to attract $5 billion of private investment. What this chart represents is the orange line is what that private investment amount has been over time, starting in 2013 through the end of 2022. That gray sort of ghosted cone, what that represents is in some of that original DMC development work, there was a projected rate of investment that was sort of identified as a standard or as a guidepost. And what we've done is we've taken sort of plus or minus 20% of that roadmap and plotted it on this chart to see if we are sort of within that that span of what we are comfortable with. And so you can see at the end of 2022, Mayo and non-Mayo private investment gets us to just under $1.5 billion, which is within that plus or minus 20%.
And it might be worth noting that is also, the pandemic was in that timeline, which was not anticipated at the beginning of the modeling for DMC.
Sure, correct. So if you think about that chart sort of just at a very high level, cumulative investment of nearly $1.5 billion. We've met all of the formula requirements to receive maximum state aid. The 2022 number coming back from sort of the dip from COVID was above the average over the previous 8 years. But we have noticed a slowdown in non-Mayo private investment, and so started monitoring that a few years ago. And this is sort of representative of that. So this is the non-Mayo portion of private investment by year. You can see it peaked in 18-19 and then has been dipping. The 2023 number that's up there is a projected number. We haven't published that yet, but that's we think it's going to end up just a little bit under $13 million. So a definite trend in terms of what private non-Mayo investment has been. So when we think about private investment, we typically bucket that into a few different categories. And again, some of that AECOM work when the DMC was originally conceived and that original plan was drafted. Residential construction or residential development was one of the larger buckets that was thought of when it came to where the private non-Mayo investment was going to come from. And so what, if you think to where that private investment number starts to dip, some other things that sort of happen, and Mary sort of identified that, we saw a number of things happen that have contributed to this. The first is interest rates went up pretty dramatically from what had been essentially free money to the state we're in now. Second is COVID, supply chain disruptions, construction costs went up dramatically. And operating costs to develop and manage those buildings after they were constructed have also gone up. So this chart is just a few metrics that are meant to sort of represent some of those dynamics, and it's a multi-axis chart. So on the left you've got the federal funds rate, and on the right you've got Engineering News Record is a publication that for 100 years has published sort of a metric that is a representative cost of a certain quantity of inputs into a construction project. So things like steel and wood and construction and labor. And what you can see is starting about 2020, those borrowing costs and construction costs start to rise. We've also identified on this table the point in time in which the City of Rochester's current TIF policy was enacted. So you can see some of these current incentive policies were enacted in an environment that is much different than the one we find ourselves in right now. Any questions on this? This is a little bit jumbled.
Member Ryback.
Madam Chair, this is a really important point for us to look at. And as somebody who's been very, very strong on the idea that we should not be loose with tax increment and other tools, this might really be the moment when we actually rethink that a bit. We right now have a slowdown in housing construction, just as two key initiatives we share with the city, the Riverfront and the Transit Village, are very housing dependent. we're also, I think, well aware of the housing issues in Rochester and all around the country. I have not advocated supporting, using public money to support for market rate housing. This may actually be a moment to do that. And so I just want to kind of say that from the point of view of somebody who's been pretty strongly on the other side of the equation.
Thank you for that. And I would say nationwide, as mayors and city leaders are gathering, this exact conversation is happening, that perhaps in these exceptional times, we need to adjust our thinking, even if it may be temporarily, to help manage the issue. Member Williams.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just echo, again, in our work in housing, borrowing costs absolutely up, construction costs, insurance, security costs, utilities costs, all those operating costs through the roof, and still people struggling to pay rent, actually. And so the two trends are kind of running opposite. And for nonprofit developers, for affordable developers, as well as for for-profit developers, those operating costs are very real, and it just doesn't pencil out right now in the current market. To your point, Member Rybeck, it is important to kind of look at opportunities to catalyze private development. We're seeing that. We saw that last week in the city of St. Paul, supporting a private development project as a way to kind of catalyze that development and keep the market moving. We also need to keep the focus on affordable housing. And so in these tough economic times, we need to kind of persevere. Housing is it's a constant. We are so undersupplied that even in these tough, difficult times, we have to kind of keep the pedal to the metal, both on the affordable and the market rate side. So I know you would agree with this. It really is kind of this balance. But those cost trends are just very real. The borrowing costs, the construction costs, the operating costs, all kind of intersecting to really make it a challenging environment.
Thank you for that. And I see we have a new slide up that maybe speaks to this. Would you like to?
So what this is an accounting of the number of multifamily residential units that have been either opened or are projected to open in the DMC district from 2015 to today. That orange dotted line is sort of what the average units over that period of time are. So on an annual basis, there's been about 125, give or take, multifamily housing units constructed downtown. The 2025 is representing the Enclave project at the YMCA site that is predicted to be opened in 2025 or thought to be open in 2025. But other than that, we don't currently have anything else that projects to be operational in 24 or 25.
Thank you for that. And the need in the community, according to the Maxfield study and others, is significantly higher than this.
Yes. Madam Chair, so just to that point, I mean, this is kind of a broader community question, and I think the coalition that the Community Foundation leads here, Mayo certainly has been a part of that coalition. It just kind of raises the question of setting goals and being more visible in how we push towards a goal and what it's going to take to get there, as opposed to, and again, there's been a lot of good work done here. I am particularly grateful to the city for setting aside a portion of TIF proceeds for affordability. That is, again, industry leading across the country. But I would just encourage us and the community to think about setting goals for production, both as a way to push us towards something, as a way to not necessarily wait to see what project, to just kind of live at the whim of the marketplace. And again, I think in some of the more productive housing markets, affordable housing communities, we see that kind of goal setting, even though we know it's a push. Even though we may not get there, it sets a bar for us.
And we have one more comment, but I know we're discussing in the middle of your presentation, and this is a very important topic, obviously, and a lot of passion, at this table. But
I can hold. Go ahead.
Would you like to finish and then
Yeah,
we'll
we have
call
one
on-
more slide that sort of is meant to kick off the discussion, but happy to pause in front of it.
So would you like Member Carlson?
There are a couple projects that I know our team has been working really hard on at the city to make happen that aren't reflected because they've hit a number of of roadblocks, and they're trying to figure out how to keep those moving forward. So those are not reflected. The North Civic Center lot, the City Walk apartments, which have significant numbers associated with them, but wouldn't be projected to be done by 2026.
Correct. There's a couple projects that represent 500 to 600 units, but have not really gotten to the point where they have a solution in place to, I think, put them on that chart.
So to that point, needing to rethink some of our current policies and
Exactly.
ways of funding these projects is right on.
Madam
Thank
Chair.
you for that.
Knowing you political folks will probably be in a discussion if we did choose to do that about people saying, why in the world would you subsidize a private project? I remember pretty clearly a couple of very big debates way back in the 80s about a couple of projects on the Minneapolis Riverfront that were seen as catalytic to the rest of the projects, and they did get public support during a tough economic time. I thought it was a terrible idea at the time. In reality, if you now look at the downtown Minneapolis Riverfront, one of the most, if not the most valuable piece of real estate in the state of Minnesota, it was a smart financial move for the city. Forget everybody else's interests. It was a very smart financial move for the city. Now let's move to the Riverfront in Rochester. If you look at all the exciting things that have happened since Destination Medical Center started, I would say one that has been much slower than we expected is the Riverfront becoming a live-work place that had significantly more people living there. And I do think, to Paul's point, we should be looking at a number. We should also be looking at double bottom lines. And one of them is long-term growth of the property tax rate, and the other is people on the river. And I think there are a couple arguments for that.
Thank you. We have one more comment. Member Tyne.
Ultimately, I think TIF is a city initiative, not a DMC initiative, and I'm not going to tell the city how to run the city. I would caution that I don't think we can TIF our way out of the housing problem. And TIF is a powerful weapon that can be used to bring things forward that the market would not naturally fill, like housing, lower income housing, things like that are not going to naturally happen. And I think if we start TIFing market rate housing, we're going down a path that we may regret. And I think what we really need is wages to catch up with housing costs.
I hear mm-hmm-ing. I think there is some agreement on that, and I would just, say, I think we need to be very careful about that, but there may be some short-term actions that need to be taken in order to get the amount of housing we need. And Member Carlson would like to comment.
I was at the Economic Development Association Minnesota meeting last week, and some developers were presenting. Of course, there was a very significant focus on housing and how many different tools we need to be considering right now, far beyond TIF. But there was a comment made by several developers around, we're sort of at a point in the market where many of these projects, no matter whether they're market rate or not, will not happen without public investment. That was really striking to me as a policymaker, and hard to hear, but I think worth considering as part of the discussion.
And Member Baker, I think, I didn't see the yellow hand, but I've heard you raised your physical hand, so I would like to call on you.
Exactly. I'll put a yellow glove on.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would just like to, I guess, echo, I think, the majority sentiment. As I read through this and think about the plan, housing is what frightens me most. And we aren't going to have place for the workers, even if we can train them and find them. And housing is a long pole in the tent. And so we really need to get on this now. And I think it gets down to often what happens in business, which is, what mistake are you willing to make? And the mistake I would say leaning towards would be $1 too much in subsidy that triggers new housing is a lot smarter than $1 too few in subsidy that triggers none. If we don't get this housing going right now, we are going to find ourselves in a position where we can't house the workers that we need even to build or spend the $5 billion. So we are in Rochester. I mean, this is a mammoth undertaking. And Mayo's gonna have to step up in ways that Mayo's never stepped up before. The city's gonna have to step up, the county, the state. We are all gonna have to step up to make this happen. And so, Mayor, I'm very happy to hear you saying, you know, we know we're gonna have to pull some levers that we don't like to pull or haven't pulled in the past. I think that's a very important notion. And I would just encourage us, the mistake we wanna make is make sure that we do enough, maybe +1, if that's the mistake, to trigger housing development now, because we can't afford to have several years go by and have nothing show up. And that's exactly what's going to happen in this economic environment.
Thank you for those comments. I think many of us lose sleep thinking about these issues. I think we do have one more slide that we've not we've not covered. Do we want to do that? And then
Well, I think, sorry,
Mr. Seif, members.
Chair Norton, I would say that I think this is the conversation we were hoping. This is, in fact, a conversation that is going to be coming forward to City Council led by city staff. We talk about the levers. You know, there are more than money is one way, one of the levers. There are other levers, and our city partners have done an incredible job around zoning and comp plan and the UDC to set up the regulations that make it more efficient. Systems that we can put into place, the role we can play in marketing and attracting developers. There's a plethora of things that we should and ought to do and should continue to do. And I think what we're hearing, and I think what will be shared with the city council conversation, is the experiences you've had in other communities, acknowledging that this is not just a Rochester problem. This is a challenge being faced elsewhere, but we care about Rochester, so that's where our concern is, and that's where our focus is. So I think with that, I would say this has been very helpful and something that we can share with our city colleagues as they take on discussing the levers they can pull.
And we're going to have a question, and I do just want to say, Member Tyne, I do appreciate your comments because this has been the discussion we've been having. So what you have said is something we've all been thinking about and talking about, so I appreciate you raising it. Member Carlson, you?
I just wanted to clarify that the DMC does have our own TIF policy compared to the city, where DMC can apply specific TIF to projects in the district.
If I could help clarify that, only the city can authorize tax increment financing. There is a relaxed standard that was baked into the DMC legislation that would allow for, and that standard being around assessing blighted properties. And because there are many properties in downtown Rochester that are no longer blighted because the blight's been removed and surface parking doesn't qualify as blight, the legislation does allow for more relaxed interpretation.
And I think the link is that the city of Rochester was given permission, I guess, to count the TIF funds that we approve as part of our obligation for the Destination Medical Center, our portion of that funding. Thanks for the
Madam Chair,
Member Ryback.
just for context, any other mayor, city council, and civic community in the state of Minnesota would salivate at the tools that Rochester has been given for Destination Medical Center. The state said a whole different set of rules apply to Rochester because of Destination Medical Center. So I'm just saying that what you can do here and what we can help you do is something nobody else can do. So the rules that people have and the values they have about what other cities should do in this situation just need to be adjusted for the potential that you have here.
Thank you. And I'm looking at the time, and I notice we do have a guest speaker, and thank you, Mr. Flynn, for your comments. And he might have a tight timeline here, so I want to be respectful of his presentation, which is MedTech 3.0.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Mike, thank you for that presentation. Turning to the next item on the agenda, I'd like to welcome Chris Shadd to the table, and of course Peter Frosch, who some of you know, president of Greater MSP. We are here today to ask you to consider providing communication of support as a partnering organization to MedTech 3.0. and to meaningfully contribute to its outcomes. And we are careful to say this is not asking for a letter of support, though it may look like a letter, but it's really something bigger than a letter, in the sense that what's happening in Minnesota through this initiative is really about creating a consortium, creating collaboration, creating something that's never existed in this community. And I am pleased to introduce Peter Frosch, who is president of Greater MSP, who has been an incredible leader in this conversation, leading all of hundreds of partners in advancing this, and including the designation in October and the work that's gone on subsequently. So, Peter, if I could just turn to you to share with our board a little background about MedTech 3.0 and some future steps.
Great. And I'll assume you can hear me, and someone let me know if
We
you
can.
Okay, great. I would have liked to be with you today, and I look forward to being with you again sometime in the future. Appreciate the invitation. Just to start, Greater MSP and the Destination Medical Center have a strong and effective working relationship that goes back a number of years. The DMC team is great, and we work with them every chance we get. So I think today's conversation is about an immediate and strategic opportunity to deepen and accelerate this relationship for the purpose of delivering on DMC's stated goals. So we will briefly talk about MedTech 3.0 and then ideally get into some back and forth. The background in MedTech 3.0, as you likely understand, the Greater MSP Partnership, which part of our work is to expand and attract companies around the country and around the world, has been engaged in the medical technology sector, from the start in 2011. So that was not new. But a new opportunity came forth in the end of 2022 when Jeff Martha, the CEO of Medtronic, who is a leader in Greater MSP, came forward kind of quietly with an idea and said that Medtronic was getting approached, he was getting approached around the country and around the world to kind of double down on investments in building up ecosystems in other places. And it got him thinking about what's possible or necessary in Minnesota. And in his articulation, he said, there's a new frontier of the medtech industry to be won. And the Minnesota, thinking about Minneapolis, St. Paul, thinking about Rochester, we have a right to win that, maybe more than anybody. But if we don't go after it, someone else is going to do it. And so the question from Jeff at that time, is this something you'd be interested in exploring? And so, we said yes in late 2022. And so this is relatively new, but it moved very fast. So at the beginning of 2023, we had just kind of a big idea and exploration. And so Greater MSP built a task force that involved the Mayo Clinic at that time, but also CEO leadership from Health Partners and Alina and Medica and top leaders from the University of Minnesota. And we got together in April and with this kind of big picture idea. And in May, the Federal Tech Hubs competition was announced. And so this, as you may be familiar, was a national competition for the purpose of building up technology centers around the United States, in addition to Boston and San Francisco, for the purposes of economic and national security. And the federal government had designated a set of key must-win industries for the United States. And one of those areas was medtech and biotech. So looking at this competition, around the table that group had just assembled, and an exploration became a very high paced project starting in June of last year. And so what we worked to do together is to create a strategy, which we call Minnesota MedTech 3.0, that does two big things. It takes AI and machine learning and big data and will bake that into the medtech industry and how innovation is done. It's also about how the players in the ecosystem, medtech companies, but also startups, and venture capital, and hospital systems, and insurers, and the university, how do those leaders and entities work together in more strategic, purposeful ways with the end of simultaneously speeding innovation and solving problems that we've not yet solved in medicine, improving patient outcomes, and managing costs. Recognizing that one of the challenges with how things are done today is that oftentimes innovation actually creates other challenges in terms of cost in the health system. So that is at the core of the MedTech 3.0 strategy. It was co-created and it's co-owned by those entities, including the Mayo Clinic. We had a dialogue early on in this competition, so back in, I think, June, Patrick, it was, that Medical Alley and the DMC and Greater MSP got together and explored whether or not it made sense to apply together. Because I think at that time, the DMC was looking at its own application. And it seemed like two different ideas, and so we said, well, let's be mutually supportive. These are not competitive ideas, but it doesn't actually make sense to bring these together. But once we submitted in August, and in October, the White House called, and the application submitted by Greater MSP for MedTech 3.0 was designated. It won as one of the 31 tech hubs around the country, and the only one that's specifically focused on medical technology. And so at that time, we immediately reconnected and started figuring out how we could merge this whole effort together. Because while the application is going in from the metro region, because those are the rules of the federal competition, this is really a statewide plan with global ambitions. There was a CEO level meeting in December that included Dr. Ferrugia, where a couple of key decisions were made. First, everyone agreed we wanted to go after the Tech Hubs Phase 2 competition. Because we were designated as one of the 31 winners, we get to compete for about $50 million in federal funding that would activate the strategy. But also because everyone around the table recognized that the strategy we create together is worth billions of dollars, everyone said $50 million will not make or break this idea, so we're going to do this no matter what. So right now, the state of this whole effort is a very intense sprint that's aimed to February 29th. On that date, a 100-page application is going to go in to the federal government. As was mentioned, 150 people are working on this application today in 6 different teams, including the DMC and in Mayo in various ways. Now, what will be submitted is a set of projects, one on talent and workforce, one on entrepreneurship and innovation, one on kind of a big data platform, and another in creating and building the hub that will drive the whole strategy forward. The details of all those projects are now being worked out. Important to understand about the nature of those projects, they are co-owned projects. So in every case, you have to have at least 3 entities who are backing one of those projects. So it's not the kind of situation where Mayo has a project and the University of Minnesota has a project and the state has a project. This is really about putting the pieces together and really taking bigger swings and going after really bold ideas that are in some ways maybe too risky for any one entity to do alone, but together we're de-risking those strategies and building them together. So we're racing to get that application in by the 29th. The mention at the beginning of support from the DMC is about kind of indicating that the DMC is a part of this big effort, so that if we win, we're able to move forward together. And I'll pause at that time and glad to fill in the details or talk more about what might come next. Patrick, maybe you could help me if there was something key that I left.
No, thank you. Peter, I think you covered a good outline and background, and I would leave it open to members for questions.
Members, this is your opportunity to ask questions about what you've just heard. Share your excitement, interest.
I'll jump
Member
in.
Rybeck,
Yeah.
thank you.
I was waiting for Member Campbell or Baker or some of the others of us who have been active in greater MSP to say, gee, sitting on both of these boards or other boards, it's been really exciting to see how the staffs are working together, and it's been a little humbling to think how little the broader civic and public dialogue is, that this is really one effort. So I'm thrilled that we are going after this federal grant. I hope and I know it's really about more than that, and I think Peter just alluded to this. This, to me, is really about what is the connective tissue that helps us compete with the rest of the world instead of these old, antiquated ways of competing with each other. That this is the same distance, as I've said before, San Francisco to Silicon Valley is the same amount of time between these two places. Minneapolis and St. Paul have always had trouble competing globally because we spend more time fighting each other than together. Hopefully that's less over, but this is a phenomenal opportunity. I believe we should also be doing this on attractions and conventions and such. But the beautiful thing about this is once the application is in, I think we're going to have a template for how we should be talking about this effort already. If we want to create a destination, if we want to create a hub, nobody can compete with what is in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and what is in Rochester and in between. If we decide that they're competing, then we're not ever going to be able to be competitive. So this is great news to me.
Thank you for those comments. And I, too, was kind of energized by this idea of not just pairs of groups, but multiple entities that are working together for a cause that's good for the entire state. I see Member Campbell has his little yellow hand up.
Peter, thank you for this. After being on this board since the beginning, almost 10 years ago, this is probably one of the most exciting presentations that I've heard while sitting on this board. Having been around when Greater MSP was created, candidly, this is why Greater MSP was created, to provide the leadership, to provide the collaboration, to bring participants together to really accomplish things that are extraordinary. You know, and I think about the turmoil that exists in healthcare across the nation, and even in our own state. I mean, we have the turmoil of closing facilities in Greater Minnesota. The headline in the Star Tribune this morning reflects the problems that we face in healthcare today. We've got the situation of the Academic Health Center at the University of Minnesota. We got the $5 billion investment in Rochester. I think several of you have already commented on where my head is, and that is that, you know, some of the key participants in healthcare in Minnesota are actually competitors. But in this effort, we must look beyond our own each self-interest for the good of the whole, for the good of the state of Minnesota. So we must keep our eye on the goal of becoming the MedTech center of the country. And this is really, this is wonderful. It's really hard work, and people are going to have to think differently about things in the future than they have in the past. But if we're going to accomplish this, it's going to create something that candidly we can't even imagine today. So let's keep our eye on the ball. Let's keep working at it. Let's keep working as a team. There's so much to be had here. I'm really thrilled with what you've just presented, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments, Member Carlson.
Just a very quick thank you to Peter for your leadership in this and for making sure that Rochester is considered as part of our regional approach. It is, from our perspective and vantage point, it is such an obvious fit and really beneficial, I think, for the entire state for us to be thinking together on this. And just thanks to DMC leadership, this is for thinking out of the box, and then actually our next agenda item, putting some of the infrastructure in place to help us really realize the vision of MedTech in our community. And I was going to say one other thing, but I just appreciate, my favorite part of this is the public-private sector collaboration and thinking outside of our own organization or corporation's walls to do our state good.
Thank you for that. And I see Member Baker has his hand up.
Electronic this time.
No, electronic this time.
I'm a learner. I would, I just like to echo what Jim said and also, Member Carlson. Peter, you know how my Greater MSP, I think, has been excellent. And Peter, you've been a great leader of Greater MSP. It's exactly what it was designed to do. I think it is a very smart thing for DMC to align, so.
Here, here.
Thank you for those comments, members. It looks like we're back on time and ready to move on. So thank you for that presentation, and you have another one.
Thank you. Just I wrap up this presentation, I do, Dr. Otley did acknowledge Chris Shadd's role in this. He did not necessarily acknowledge his own role. Dr. Otley, in his day job, one of his day jobs as medical director of Platform, has been hands-on in describing the way in which Mayo Platform can contribute to smart MedTech and partnering with or aligning with the University of Minnesota and many others. So Dr. Otley and Dr. Ferrugia both very hands-on in this process, so thank you. If I could turn to the next agenda item, Mayor, we have been working very closely with our colleagues at the city around how do we, well, over time we've been working very closely on many initiatives, but together we've been working on how do we align and up our game as we are responding to this incredible moment in Rochester's history. I'm pleased to introduce City Administrator Allison Zelms, who many of you know or have met with or worked closely with, to invite her to give an abbreviated version of a discussion that she's been holding with City Council, a multi-part discussion that really is intended to socialize more publicly just how significant a moment we are in and how we all need to prepare ourselves to succeed and ensure our community's success during this time. So with that, Ms. Elms.
Certainly. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to the board for inviting me to be here, and an unexpected thank you to Dr. Otley for the dynamic introduction. Appreciate that, and for helping set the stage for this conversation. I'm actually going to start off a little bit at the end of what the conversation was with the City Council at our study session, and highlights of what we heard when we were talking about what we have in front of us as a growing city, was confidence that Mayo would be able to deliver, that there was a sense that the City Council was going to listen to the team if we need something, that there was a bit of feeling of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of what needs to be delivered in the next 7 to 10 years, and that we must deliver on that mission. That transformation and needs to really still retain the character of what makes Rochester a special place to be, that it's unlikely that we will ever experience the scale of transformation elsewhere in our careers or lifetime, and really excitement about what we can accomplish and provide for the community through these public and private investments, not just the private investment that we've been talking about with, of course, our partner at Mayo Clinic, but all of the public investments that are going to be coming to fruition at that same time. And then the desire to organize and resource in a way that allows us to meet this exceptional moment in the history of Rochester. So I start with saying that because it really aligns well with the top 3 initiatives that the City Council and Mayor prioritized recently. Obviously, we have affordable living, economic vibrancy and growth management, and quality services. But if you look at what has elevated from our very large action plan, really supporting the private sector and constructing market rate and affordable owner-occupied housing is up there. Of course, we know there's all kinds of housing that's necessary. Investing in public realm and recognizing what that can do to make sure that we are attracting folks, and then developing that transition plan so that we're prepared for the future from the perspective of sustainability with that 2030 power supply plan. Excuse me. And we've been planning for this for quite some time, and I think this just shows you that working with focus and deliberation has prepared us with different types of revenue sources, and set the stage for us to be able to meet this mission over the next 7 to 10 years with the federal funding we've been able to secure, state funding, of course, our partnership with Destination Medical Center, the community supporting the park levy, and it allows us really to set the stage to not just transform downtown, but transform the rest of our town at the same
So DMC
time.
is not the only thing.
DMC is not the only thing that we are doing. We support as a city, not just our downtown community where this exceptional transformation is happening, but we will have projects all around the city of Rochester. So in some ways, it's quite a moment to meet, but also I think it's transformational in being able to show how much we rely and serve our downtown, but our downtown is also creating the catalyst for our ability to invest elsewhere in the community, as well as our partners and their investment with the Mayo Clinic. And, it's really important to know that because Unbound isn't just a once-in-a-lifetime investment in Rochester. It will also transform healthcare as we know it across the world as others catch up to this bold model. So what kind of scale are we talking about just with the Mayo investment? When you think about $5 billion, and it really is more than $5 billion, it's closer to about $7 billion, and it could be more with a 7-year trajectory. But if you look at that far left part of this chart, $600 million in annual permit valuation was our highest ever annual building permit valuation. And when you think about $5 billion or $7 billion over 7 years, that's more than double our annual investment each year going forward. And we know that we will have other projects coming online. When you put that in perspective with the St. Croix Bridge or the US Bank Stadium at $1 billion of today's dollars, or even the Southwest Light Rail at $2.7 billion, or the largest expansion and investment in an airport at MSP Airport at $3.2 billion, and put in context where those investments were happening, we really have a moment to meet here in Rochester. So we are a city of 120,000 people, 123,000 people about. We are in a municipal, an MSA of about 225,000 people, and we have $5 billion of investment plus almost $1 billion of public investment coming over the next 7 years. So wonderful opportunity to have, and it hopefully will support significant population growth over the next 20 years that we're anticipating. Fortunately, I think our collaboration has positioned Rochester for success, especially in these downtown projects. We have continued to invest in infrastructure together. We have set the stage for additional investment beyond what we've seen here, and we've really been focusing on an organizational mindset that will allow us to deliver and continue moving forward in a way that will allow us to meet the moment here. And so that joint planning is really critical to continue, and I think really sets the stage for this investment to be able to be delivered upon. We could have had probably 25 more boxes on this slide, but we did not. So if you really look back to 2015, which is not that long ago in the history of a city or an organization, through 2030, we've updated policies, we've set the stage, we've invested in infrastructure. The state and federal government has invested in us in large part because of all of the different activities that we've taken. We have the traffic study, comprehensive plan, unified development code. Those things don't seem, they're policies, but they really do change the way that our organization is able to deliver for the private sector. And we have significant additional investment happening in our core infrastructure, with our water reclamation plant, with our downtown building energy transition projects, with the Rochester Public Utilities being able to help building owners and residents better understand their use of energy with an AMI project. We have the 6th Street project coming online, which is a decades-old idea. Park maintenance facility is moving off the river, freeing up more opportunity for us to beat Minneapolis as a place on the river. And of course, we have investment happening now and on into the future with LINK and then achieving that RPU plan. That's a lot of work, and we need to really meet this inflection point in our community in a different way than we have. In the past, over that 40-year period, we were really growing outward as a community. So we had significant infrastructure investment in utilities, in our parks, in how much water main we need to support a 55 square mile plus city. And now we are growing up. And so if you look to the right-hand side of this chart, you will see the amount of full-time equivalent teammate support that is supporting the 110 to 262% growth in infrastructure and public spaces and public facilities that we have to provide to our community. And on that right-hand side, in that same time span, 17% growth in the number of people in our organization to support that. Of course, we've capitalized on technology and process orientation, all of those different things in order to be able to deliver. But having this amount of investment over the next 7 years really gives us an opportunity to look at our growth differently and take that amount of time and one-time energy and prepare to have the next 20 years be better supported than what we had been prepared for after the growth of the prior 40. And we've been preparing in our own organization for all of our existing employees to have additional capacity and learning and growth and leadership. And we're doing that with this model of high performance where we're investing in people and a philosophy where we're focusing on people, relationships, and problem solving more than we ever have in providing growth and development for our existing employees to be able to do multiplication instead of addition when we're thinking about how we deliver services and work together. But we know that that isn't going to be all it takes in order to get to 2030 with all we have in front of us. So we will need to be staffing for project delivery, and we will need to be making sure that we're staffing to deliver on the public realm and doing all of our day-to-day activities that people rely on as a city organization as well as we can along the way at the same time. So we will be applying that same concept to more people resources in the next 6 to 12 months. So on February 12th, we will be presenting additional information to the City Council on how we can do that because we do need to support the transformation. Again, I think we're building off of a model that works well. We know that we have things we need to deliver on as the city, just like Mayo is going to have a transformation happening in their own organization and their ability to deliver on a $5 billion package for their campus. We have a great model of project managers, DEI work, and sustainability happening in collaboration where we have DMC funded projects and city funded projects, but we work in an integrated way to deliver on a shared success. And I do think it's also just really important to point out, and if you have a chance, please take a look at the presentation from the prior City Council study session, because I think Cindy's presentation was really inspirational. It takes a little more time than like 10 minutes to do that. But we do have to think about this in a way about, we have put a lot of strategy in place and we've been patient waiting for this moment, and now it's all here at one time. So we're going to have to apply a lot of those same concepts to be patient. 7 years is a very condensed time frame to deliver all of these projects. But day to day, it's going to require a lot of resilience, because day to day, it's going to feel like a really long time for people getting to and from where they're going and wanting it to be complete. But I'm hopeful that if we can staff this appropriately, it will set us up not just to meet this moment, but for continued growth that allows Rochester to be a leader now and in the future. So how did we get to now? We have spent a lot of time working on gaining investment and having those federal and state funds be able to deliver. We've been working with our elected officials and doing advocacy, and we've been very successful, but now we're going into the during phase. And during all of this transformation, we have to deliver on the implementation parts of this. We're going to have a lot of permitting happening. We are going to need to be making sure that we're out in the marketplace getting really good construction bids for the public realm pieces, competing with some private realm pieces, and hopefully not just relying on Rochester, but the surrounding communities also to gain some of this support as a regional center. But a rural regional center, we cannot survive as that without the support and supporting our regional neighbors and the surrounding communities who will also stand to gain from this. We have to continue optimizing our processes and adapting to that state of change. But 7 years also provides enough time for us to really look at our staffing model in context to where we know we're going to have people leaving us over that period of time. So we can be thinking not just about how we're going to staff up, but how do we evolve into that future state. We will have some significant additional one-time resources coming in at this time that can be used for operating. And so it's really actually kind of an unprecedented timeline for a city to be able to do some planning on our staffing model and think about not just this moment where we're at this huge peak, but where is our next baseline going to be in order to support a transformed community and keep that momentum going to be able to support future projects that can sustain us into the future. So with that, I would just leave you with this thought that we are in a pivotal moment in history, not just in Rochester, but in the world. So, we really are energized to meet the moment, and we know that we need to do our part, support those DMC projects, support and be able to deliver and keep moving those private investments that are coming from Mayo Clinic, and we know others will as well. Double down on the collaborative model that we enjoy with DMC and our other partners, add the capacity that's needed for the city to meet the moment on the things that we have to deliver, and again, assure that we're a leading city, transforming and prepared for a bright future, and where we don't just meet this moment, but gain momentum for what's beyond 2030. And I'm hopeful that if we kind of take on this model and this we can do anything attitude with the right resources and the right people at the table, that this will feel like we did this with and for the community rather than to the community. And I think that's critical as we move forward through the next 7 to 10 years and beyond 2030. So thank you.
And Patrick, you've got a presentation, and then maybe we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, my suggestion would be that we would take the opportunity to discuss or field any questions that
Okay.
I'm happy to do it, however, but I think with the
Does anyone have questions for Administrator Zelms?
Well, just a couple of comments. One, bravo, as a former and now recovering deputy mayor from the city of St. Paul, I would encourage you to double down on that permit staff right off the bat.
They're in there.
It's a scary number. Yeah, just really echoing several of the things that you said. I mean, more people and the right people, I just think is just so critical. Mayor Ryback will probably recall this. I mean, when we were doing the light rail, the Central Corridor light rail line, in St. Paul at least, we had someone directly in the mayor's office, which is strong mayor system, who was just a collaborator, a problem solver, worked across private businesses. Nancy Homans was her name, and city planner by training, but just a problem solver, working across the different municipal agencies. So the right people in the right places, in addition to more people, I think is just really critical. And I heard you saying exactly that. And then thinking about the investment, again, at the time we talked about beyond the rail. So how do we think about, at the time we were talking about greening the trench, how do we think about placemaking in addition, alongside the additional investments? How do these placemaking investments relate to folks in neighborhoods around the new buildings, the new investments, and then also about voice? And I heard you talk about people and voice and the community's voice in all of that. So I'm just echoing what you said. I heard Mr. Kriesel at the very beginning talk about precipice. I heard Dr. Otley use the word precipice, and you're certainly talking about precipice. So I mean, I think this is really a unique moment, obviously.
Thank you for those comments. And I would say, to your point about community engagement, we are going to be entering into about a year and a half community engagement process so that the community can tell us what they want for our future out 25 years. Mm-hmm. So that will be going in tandem with everything that you just heard here. So the community keeps involved and doesn't feel left out and that it was done to them to the point that was made. So I have Member Campbell online.
I'd just like to thank you. This is fantastic. It's a great report. It's incredibly insightful, I think, for us to see the plan that Rochester has. Patrick, you sent us I don't know, 57 or 60 slides, which I have electronically, but I would ask you if you could print off, I'm kind of old-fashioned, but if you could print off the copies of this particular presentation. I think this is something that all of us DMC board members need to really understand, because we have an opportunity to talk to people all the time about what's happening in Rochester, and I think this really summarizes beautifully, what the plan is for the city. And so I want a hard copy so I can put it under my pillow and digest it, so that when I talk to people, I can really tell them what the plan is. Well done. This is spectacular.
We love to have you brag for us, so that's great. We'll get to that. Seeing no other comments, let's move on to the Destination Medical Center
Just stay here. You don't have to leave,
developmental plan update.
but I do need that. So we positioned this presentation under the same agenda item called Supporting Transformation, and acknowledging the work that Allison is leading at the city in building the capacity of the city in parallel to our work. There is also the work and the requirement that we have to update the DMC development plan. And as you know, state law requires that we update the development plan at least every 5 years, but it's not because it's required that we're doing it. We are doing it because it's required, but it's because it's needed and it's an opportune moment. So what we are wanting to prepare you for is that we are now in this kind of phase we're in right now is building out the data set necessary to establish assumptions so that we come to the this planning process with a better understanding of employment, future employment needs, future including construction, but non-construction employment, changes in the housing market, all of the facts you need to make plans for future investment. So we will begin our work just establishing the data set, sort of the truth, if you will, that we agree on to work towards. The plan requires that it reflects progress and updates on progress, that it acknowledges other planning going on in the community, and that it reaffirms the DMC mission. So these are the obligations we have, but also how we plan to go about it. Chair Wheelock mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that there is a joint meeting of DMCC and DMC EDA, City Council and County Board in May. We really see that as the kickoff, formal kickoff to this planning process, and we intend to come to you with having done some of it, some if not all of the data work necessary to begin that. And our work complements, I think, the work that the mayor referred to, that she is leading around thinking about the long-term vision for the city, 25 years out. And so it's thinking about, what do we have to do tomorrow to deliver on our work? What do we have to do over the next few years so Rochester is ready 5 years from now? Our education system, our childcare system, our housing, our transportation and public space system, and then where do we want to be in 25 years? So you can sort of see the concentric circles that we're talking about, timelines that we're talking about, and how they all relate to each other, and that you have leadership happening for each of those concentric circles. Ultimately, this is a process we bring back to DMC for formal approval and City Council for formal approval, and we intend to do that in the spring of 2025. So I guess that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, and
this
since
topic.
this is going to affect the DMC board, does anyone want to ask questions or provide feedback at this time, or do you want to wait until we gather in May? I guess that might be a little late if people have concerns or comments. Looking at this timeline, I mean, feedback now or thumbs up is what you're looking for. Thumbs up, great. That should give you what you're looking for. We do have next on the agenda progress on the pre-authorized DMC Capital Priorities, and we have a number of those, and I think we're going to have I think there'll be some interesting discussion.
Yes, thank you.
On these.
Thank you. We'll take a moment for colleagues to join at the table here. So we set this agenda item up and described it as such. Progress on DMC, don't count on me for pithy agenda item titles. Progress on pre-authorized DMC capital priorities. So there's probably a better way of terming it, but the intent is to bring you along on the progress we are making on topics that were considered and contemplated in the DMC approved budget, the budget you approved in 2023, and then further approved by City Council. In that budget, it talked about something we call strategic redevelopment. And in strategic redevelopment, we had a couple of categories, MedTech infrastructure and downtown property support. And then there's also pre-approval for work going on the riverfront. And you've asked for updates as we're making progress on these, so that should there be a future decision, you are prepared and have weighed in and given feedback. So with that, I'm going to ask Chris Shad to lead the discussion on progress we're making on MedTech infrastructure. This is our way of describing the innovation district and capacity that we are continuing to build and work on. So Chris?
Great. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if this microphone is on, but this time I'm up here and I'm actually going to speak. So it's a pleasure to be in front of you. I heard the word precipice earlier. The word I think of today is convergence. We heard this from one of our public speakers, somebody from the community that came in. Rochester is a place of convergence. People are coming here from around the world for health and hope and healing. And we have people who have come here from around the world to meet those people in their needs, to help them on their journey of health and hope and healing. Discovery Square is a place also that we've always envisioned as a place of convergence. It's a place where people that have solutions that they want to take to market, it's where they can bring those solutions and get those solutions out to market, and it's where their workforce gets trained. So we really have envisioned Discovery Square as that place of convergence. In order for that to happen, we've built this strategy around building awareness, building the ecosystem, and building the infrastructure. So that is the strategy of Discovery Square, to build awareness, build ecosystem, and build infrastructure. And we're going to spend some time today talking about building that infrastructure. So 1 and 2 Discovery Square are a really good start. They're buildings that are a good place for certain companies to be able to land and put down roots. Companies like Philips, Boston Scientific, Rion, Exact Sciences, companies like that. It's a good start, but it's not sufficient. For every Exact Sciences in the market, there are hundreds of companies that they think they have good ideas that can take to market, but they don't have the resources to be in Class A kinds of space. They are technology rich, they're cash poor. They need to be able to extend their burn rate so they can get their technology out to market. So they need space that they can afford. They need programmatic support that helps them navigate from idea to market. And they need a workforce to get them there. So there's a special kind of infrastructure that's needed within those buildings that we know is needed. This approach is informed by market studies. It's informed by literally hundreds and hundreds of conversations Mike and I and others have had with companies, inventors, innovators, solvers around the world. We hear these themes over and over and over again. Shared lab, maker lab, and simulation lab. So some updates on where we are at on those 3 pieces of infrastructure that we've identified as being needed. Simulation lab, you could think of it as a flexible healthcare space that is used for a couple of purposes, right? One purpose is for training. It's a place where the workforce of the future can get trained in a safe environment where they're not working on real patients, they're working in a simulated setting. But it's not only for training, it's actually for testing. It's a place where industry, we heard about smart MedTech, it's a place where technology can be tested in a safe and flexible medical-like space. So in the simulation lab, that effort is being led by GROUK, Greater Rochester Advocates for Universities and Colleges. There are 11 organizations that are supporting that effort. DMC is one of those. GROUK has been able to launch a pilot, or they will be launching a pilot space in Rochester, downtown Rochester, this year. but we need a permanent solution. And ultimately, we are going to need $11 million for a permanent operation. We don't know where that's going to land. We don't know where that's going to come from. We just know it's needed. And we are supporting that effort as best we can. On the Maker Lab, I get the question a lot, well, what is a Maker Lab? Think of it as a place where there are tools that are cutting and soldering and manufacturing and fabricating things. The medical devices, the technologies that go on a person or in a person, that kind of like a well-appointed shop in a garage sort of thing, but really smart people that are doing amazing things. We continue to explore opportunities there as well. There was an early version of the MedTech grant that we heard from Peter. There was an early version of the grant that included some funding for a Maker Lab to do some of that work. It didn't make the cut. I don't think it's going to make the cut. There are too many competing priorities. $50 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually not a lot of money when there's a big lift. So we will continue to explore partnership opportunities around that one. The shared lab or the wet lab, this is the one where we've made the most progress, and ultimately what we're going to be looking for from you all is some insights as to what's important to you as we put together a funding request at a future board meeting. What information is going to be important to you so we can bring back to you a fully formed funding request. This is the kind of place, think test tubes and beakers and really cold freezers and warm incubators where things are being grown. Taking something out of a body, doing something to it, and putting it back in somebody. So laboratory, sort of wet lab sort of work. It's a really very specialized kind of infrastructure. And there are really three things that are needed for that kind of space. You need a building, and we have that. Mortensen has put up 2 Discovery Square, and that's a space where that can take place. But we need real estate investment inside of that space in building out the turnkey space. So space that is ready to go when the lease is signed, and it's at a price point that the companies that are going in there can afford to have. And we need an operator. We need an operations organization, somebody that knows how to run that kind of space. We know that the turnkey laboratory space, to go from shell space to finished space, it's about $10 million. And if there's a way to underwrite some of that, some or all of that, then the lease is more affordable to the companies that are going in there. The operator, we know that the operating entity is going to have to raise more than $10 million in order to launch it. They need to pay for their staff, they need to pay for their equipment. They probably will also be investing in the companies. That's going to be their responsibility, is to make that happen. We've identified an operating entity. We have vetted them. Mayo Clinic has vetted them. They want to be here, and they want to pursue raising the money for that operations. We're at a point now where sort of a chicken and an egg sort of situation. They need confidence that the space is going to be delivered, the infrastructure is going to be delivered, that they can pursue raising the money for the operations. But we need to know that they're going to raise the money for the operations in order to invest in the space so that it's there to be used. So it's sort of a parallel track of conversations. We're at that point now. We have, think of it as other DMC projects where we have a private partner who's willing to make investment, but it requires, and they're willing to invest their own capital, but they need some infrastructure investment in order to make that project happen. So we're at a point now where we think we might be able to come back with a funding request. We need to know what's important to this group, what kind of questions we should be asking, what kind of information do we need to be bringing back along with a funding request for that turnkey laboratory space in 2 Discovery Square.
So do you want to take comments now, or did you want to? Okay. So I think this is exciting. I'm a little disappointed that the first 2, the simulation lab that we're not making, although I love the idea of the private, but the Maker Lab, that we're unable to get bites on that and move that along. But there's time, right? Moving ahead. This is exciting. The shared lab space, and one of the issues, and I guess it's a question almost, with Destination Medical Center legislation, that we have this care we need to use on supporting things that are structural, that stay with the building so the investment stays no matter who owns it, and helping someone with something that is really a business part of that. And so for me, assuring that we continue on legally. And I know Kayla watches that for us as well. But that was part of the, the defining legislation, and I don't know how you're working through that or.
Thank you, and
comment on
I will just say, absolutely noted, and I certainly committed to that as we bring something forward.
And council member, or not council member, sorry.
Whatever, yeah.
Former mayor, so I
That's
should get
right.
that right.
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair. So toward the question of what's important to us, or let me just speak for myself, it's really important that you don't ask me what's important here. And here's what I mean by that. It's really important to ask Mike, Mayo, entrepreneurs in town or whatever, what is the real-time important piece of infrastructure that emerging technology companies need. So if you were starting an enterprise here and you wanted to be located next to Mayo, you'd have to think, should I pay more rent to be next to Mayo? And wow, I have to buy fill in the blank. So, or I have to fund wet lab. Let's use that as a term. I don't know whether wet lab or whatever else is there. I do know that going way back, remembering when the Trade Center was built in downtown St. Paul, World Trade Center, the idea was they were going to put Watts lines in there so you could make a long distance call for free. I'm sure people made decisions about where to put fax machines that would attract folks. Don't ask us. Figure that out. I do know, having been in a startup once, that you really have to make these decisions. Can we hire people, or do we have to pay for that really expensive piece of technology? So my point is, build feedback loops into this so that question is constantly being done. I strongly support the idea of us supporting common infrastructure. That means that entrepreneurs don't have to pay for it, and therefore are more likely to be here than some warehouse somewhere else, because having entrepreneurs in proximity to Mayo not only helps both, but it also helps diversify the economy, because we want to have people employed in businesses other than Mayo. I think you would probably even agree. And so to grow those, what's needed?
Right, okay.
Appreciate that. Does anyone, I don't see any hands online, so I think
I'll take a stab at it.
Member Carlson.
I think our Mayor Ryback's comments are right on. It appears you've been working on this for quite a while now and really built out, I think, the starter or a thoughtful model. Sorry, I have to gather my thoughts here. And I think if you're coming back with a formal request, it would be really nice to see, here's the justification of why this is the best use of dollars right now. I think from a general perspective, it seems like a smart investment. $10 million is significantly more than I originally thought it would require, and that takes, as Chair Wheelock regularly talks about it, it requires us to weigh what we can or can't do for future decisions, and knowing there's a lot of uncertainty, good uncertainty, but some uncertainty with where we're headed with Bold Forward Unbound and needing some flexibility in how we can use our dollars. That's just something I'm thinking about.
Okay, thank you.
So it looks like Member Campbell has his hand up. And Member Wheelock.
I think I have three things that we should think about. One, Patrick, you and I talked about this, but I think we need to really understand who this partner is and their credibility and what they potentially can bring to the table. So we really, I think the board needs to understand who the partner is. Secondly, I'd be interested in Mayo's perspective on what the wet lab investment, ultimately means to them. I mean, I think some feedback from Mayo's perspective on this would be helpful. And then thirdly, there are some second or third or fourth stage companies in Rochester that probably started in this kind of wet lab space that, have now moved out to their own production facilities. They've moved out to IBM, created their own operations. And I'd be interested in their perspective of what this wet lab space might have meant to them back in the days when they were beginning.
Thank you.
It's great insight.
Thank you.
Member Wheelock.
I'm so glad I followed Member Campbell, so I won't repeat any of the things that he had mentioned. The only thing I would add to that is I would really appreciate from staff some sense of how we would measure return on investment from whatever DMC's investment is. And I'm not going to put any boundaries around how you might define that, but I think when you come back with a level of investment for our consideration, I would appreciate your thoughts and guidance on that. And I just want to add that I am really appreciative that you brought it forward at this meeting to give us some time to reflect on it before you're asking for us to make a decision. So I appreciate you socializing this idea and participation prior to that commitment request.
Thank you. And Member Carlson had another thought, maybe.
I know part of your work in exploring different models around the country has been looking at what sort of impact those models have had in the community. Do we already have some potential economic impact or return on investment that is ready to take a look at or could be by May?
We can dig into that. We can find that. What we have are anecdotes from other ecosystems. One that comes to mind is St. Louis and Cortex Innovation Center in St. Louis. They spent 10 years thinking it was a real estate play to build this innovation district, and they had cheap land and cheap buildings that big companies would want to move in, and they spent 10 years proving that model wrong. And then they started investing in supporting early stage companies and incentivizing those early stage companies and growing those early stage companies. And after 8 years, the big companies moved in because they wanted to be close to those early stage companies. So that was one of the early lessons we learned from some of those site visits we made over the years. That's more anecdotal. I don't have the hard data behind that, but I think there's ways to find it.
Thank you. I think we can move on to the next
everybody.
topic.
Thank you. Thank you. And you can stay here, Chris. You don't have to get up. So thank you. Appreciate that feedback and those insights. Very helpful. We are now going to turn the discussion to this topic that we've labeled downtown property support. And this is a topic that has been in front of the board on previous occasions. But today we're asking you to join us in discussing strategies to support rehabilitation, renovation, and reanimation of downtown properties. And I use those words because there is language like that in the DMC legislation. And to direct staff to direct us to come back with a particular or a specific approach to how we might advance this work. And just as a reminder, we have had this conversation, versions of this conversation going back to November of 2020 when the DMC development plan update, the first of the 5-year updates was completed, which of course, if you recall, November of 2020, we were still early pandemic, and out of that report talked about the idea of supporting downtown properties. In 2021, there were several conversations at this board about could we create a model here at DMC. And then we were fortunate to be awarded in partnership with the City of Rochester, who collaborated with us in submitting for the Main Street grant. We were successful in receiving first $3 million and then another nearly $1 million, so nearly $4 million as really a way, a different program, different resources, but a way of testing out this idea of if we invested in properties in the district and in other parts, other sort of main streets of Rochester, what impact that would have. We are just completing that second of the two Main Street programs. Last year, we, with many partners, had participated in the Downtown Task Force initiative, which was really conversations and strategies being developed around how do we support the regrowth and rebound of the downtown. A lot of strategies came out of that. And then in September, you approved a CIP that acknowledged the potential of playing a role with downtown properties. And then most recently, the city council adopted a new historic district in downtown, a conversation that had been tabled since 2019, taken off the table, and after lots of discussion and staff work, the city council ultimately designated a district of the downtown for historic preservation. So I would say this has been the journey that we have been on with you, and it leads us to this point. I'm going to ask Jamie Rothy, who, among other things, led the downtown task force work, and Allison Bowman, who managed our Main Street Grant Program, to make a few comments before we invite your comments, but I'm sure you may have questions while we're speaking.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So today, as we begin to explore goals and parameters on what they could look like with you, what we're asking ourselves and of you is to think about how we can approach this conversation comprehensively. We want to challenge ourselves not to jump to solutions, but perhaps take a step back and consider the whole picture of how this program could help our entire downtown. We want to look at multiple perspectives, and we're hoping we can also acknowledge lessons learned from the programs that Patrick mentioned. So the first question that we wanted to ask ourselves and you is, why is this work important? Why is it important to downtown? And why is it important to DMC? And it's actually built right into our DMC goals and experience. It's everything that we do and everything that we serve up to is building a quality experience for our community members, our patients, and our visitors, and ultimately contributes to the quality of life that we're trying to build together today. Downtowns are our city's brands. We all know this. We live here, we work here, we play here, we heal here, we celebrate here, and this is really important space to continue to invest in. Our downtown is also the core of our social and economic development. It's another reason why cities continue to focus on healthy downtowns is that they disproportionately contribute to the tax base, which is also true for Rochester and something that we've talked a lot about most recently in our 5-year update, and we'll address again in our next update. It's work that we learned from our task force, as Patrick mentioned as well. Downtowns are no longer obligations, they are destinations, and we need to think about this as we think and plan for the future. We see this in our task force work, and it shows up in much of our other work as well. And then also, it is contemplated in the DMC enabling legislation, and we want to keep that in mind as we go forward. The next question that we ask ourselves and of you is, well, what is the impact? What can we do, and what are the outcomes that we can strive for? We know that this type of investment creates jobs. It also creates increased property value, and it attracts visitors. We know that empty spaces that are sitting empty today on our main streets of our downtown could become new centers of gravity for business and for our local community. Examples like this are Marrow, which many of you may have stopped by to eat at, was an empty building that once held a law firm. Also, Papa's Popcorn, it was filled an empty space that was an empty retail space. And historical preservation is an important piece to this as well. It revitalizes our community by continuing to provide a quality of life. It's a greater shared understanding of our past, and it also strengthens our regional identity and our local pride. So we are investing in physical space, but there's much more to that as well. The last piece, as we enter into this discussion, for me, is that we also want to continue to think about partnerships. Nothing that we can do is alone, and we need to lean into these. We want to lean into our core competencies, and we want to lean into others. We know that we can bring tools to the table, but it's not our tools alone that will help solve this. It's bringing everybody together, bringing all those tools to the table where we can have the most impact on our downtown. And with that, I'll hand it back to Patrick.
So before we turn it over to discussion, I just want to ask Allison to talk for a moment about really two experiences we've had at DMC around supporting private projects, and Allison, if you just would comment on those two models as we try to think about another model.
Yep. Good morning. Thank you. So two experiences or programs that I wanted to share to help with the discussion. The first being the DMC joint funding application. This funding source was designed to help larger scale projects with bigger asks, because these projects are multi-millions of dollars. They're complex. They take a lot of staff effort to review the application, and there is a substantial application fee associated with that. This funding opportunity is available to developers today. The Main Street Grant, which was created and funded by DEED, was designed to help a smaller scale project with smaller asks. We found that a low bar of entry and a simple application was really beneficial, and it still had a big impact on the physical infrastructure improvements. We learned that supportive resources besides the funding could be beneficial, and a clear set of criteria when evaluating the projects is important. These dollars had a start and stop date, as Patrick mentioned, and so supporting smaller projects has come to an end. Patrick?
Thank you. So with that, really would invite conversation, and what we're proposing is that with feedback and insight from you all, that we would come back with a more definitive approach that works within the guardrails of the legislation and your appetite for how we are supporting downtown properties. I will just acknowledge that Cindy Steinhauser, who's at the table for the Riverfront discussion, also led the historic preservation designation. Her team did, so she will field any questions you might have regarding the historic preservation initiative. I'll put you on the spot for that, Cindy.
Sure,
but
no problem.
I know you can handle that. So with that.
So terrific. Appreciate the presentation. I'm not going to ask to go back to the picture, but when we talk about infrastructure, some of you know I threw a little fit a few months ago about sidewalk infrastructure, and I cannot miss the opportunity to say one more, if you're going to do it. Our sidewalks downtown continue to be an eyesore and a hazard for people with disabilities and medical patients. So I'm just going to put that out there, that it is my hope at some point that we consider that infrastructure as well and continue to work and support and have DMC help support that effort. So these wonderful old buildings also have appropriate sidewalks in front of them.
I think of that as a passionate expression, not a fit.
Okay.
So
That's probably better wording. So just to set the stage, I'm going to ask President and Member Carlson to speak on behalf of the City Council, because we did have a long and passionate discussion at the last meeting, and this, as it was pointed out, has been at the table multiple times for the last 5 years, this historic preservation discussion. But both of us spoke at the meeting after a lot of motions. We finally did come to agreement as a city council in support of the historic district. And so I'm going to let President Carlson speak to this a little bit so that you have an understanding of what we went through as a city about this issue.
So this is one of those really important policy discussions that has no perfect answer, and there's a reason it's been 5 years in the making to get to the point where we were able to make a decision. There's no perfect solution. There are people who have expectations on all sides that we knew we were letting down or breathing life into, no matter what we decided. So it was a really interesting, lively discussion with perspectives all across the board. But I think at the heart of it was, if you think about this district as part of the fabric and context of what makes our downtown so special, it is fairly reasonable to make a case for setting an historic district. If you are listening to individual property owners who certainly and understandably have concerns about what it means for their property, there's, I think, agreement amongst council that if we are going to do this, they have to be part of the conversation, and that this has to be a situation where we don't just create a district, but we create a district that is done with care, with, as Jamie Rothi was saying, with sort of a vision, with how we are going to improve it overall. So that does, from the council's perspective, mean that a variety of financial and other types of incentives and efforts would be part of it. So what was actually passed was to create the historic district with the expectation that staff would put together a financial incentive package, as well as begin a streetscape study to really understand how we can improve the district overall. I think there's a sentiment among some downtown property owners that we've done all this wonderful work around this particular district, but some of this district has not been included other than maybe replacing some sidewalks. So it was a tough discussion. I feel good about where we landed. The financial packages that were discussed were around revolving loans from the city through our economic vitality funding source from the local sales tax, the streetscaping study, and then there was a lot of support, and the mayor and I promised council we would carry this forward, that DMC think about how we use our resources here, which are a little bit more flexible than city resources in some ways, to actually look at a potential grant program like DEED or like a smaller scale joint funding application. And that's just really an expectation to bring this forward into an ordinance, that we have some sort of concrete incentive beyond just access to a loan and beyond this streetscaping approach. So I don't know how to speak as, I just want to say as strongly as possible. I have supported this for a long time, but I have supported it with the idea that we are acknowledging that this district is providing a community benefit, and they are disproportionately burdened by the fact that they are smaller buildings in our downtown that is contributing to our tax base to allow for the development that Allison was talking about as we spread geographically.
So thank you for that.
Yes.
And I will add my small story. That when I did carry the Destination Medical Center as a legislation as a legislator. And at that time, some of our business owners came to me and were frightened about speculators coming in and buying up all this beautiful property and tearing it down. And I worked with the folks from that Mayo Clinic had hired and the people that were proposing this legislation about, you know, Cheryl, is that your intent? I mean, I think I asked pretty blatantly. And they said, no, that historic district is part of what makes Rochester special. That's part of what people want to see, what is interesting to visitors, because place is always interesting. And it can be modern, but I think there's a lot of evidence that shows people go to historic areas and that they like to see that. So I had been assured at that time that that was not the intent, and that we would assure that that historic, that beautiful part of Rochester was preserved. So I did share that with the council. I share that with you so that you know that was part of the discussion at the very beginning. And now here we are years, you know, from the 10 years from there, really looking at how can we make this vision that we all shared, how can we make it come true? So having both of us said our part on behalf of the city council and our own, I think, personal passions as well, we would like to open it up for comment from Member Williams to start with, and anyone else.
Well, if I was smart, I would probably not say anything at this point. So just a few thoughts. One, I'm a big fan of the Main Street model and variations of the Main Street model, and investing in small businesses, I think, is an important strategy that we need to be part of. The whole notion of the historic district, I think, it makes sense. Glad to hear that resources are being dedicated to it, because it can change the cost structure for those business owners. What I wrote down here, though, was density, and what makes districts go is people and having legs in and around. And so I think about the housing conversation, about higher density housing in and around downtown is really critical. I think The unbound investment, obviously, bringing more workers, downtown space, and are workers in their buildings, or are they working more virtually? I mean, that's part of the equation. Public space investments, gathering spaces. I love the Discovery Walk. It brings people downtown and supports these businesses. The Chateau that we have talked about multiple times, an event space that brings people. That's what will help the small businesses and the historic district kind of thrive in the long run. So I know those have all been priorities for us, but I think, to me, as important as, doing facades, on the buildings is an important strategy. Making sure that we create density that will support the businesses and really make it a thriving place, I think, is the other important piece.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to give guidance or input? Member time.
I'm not yet on board that DMC dollars should go to sidewalks, but I am on board that if we're going to have a historic district, that we ought to back it up with dollars so that these buildings remain viable forever and we can hold on to our history in a portion of Rochester. So I strongly support this.
Thank you. Member Ryback.
First of all, I'm so glad, Mr. Kressley, you started off the meeting with the question that was put to me before I even got on this board by you, rightfully, and by family members from Rochester and everything. Are you going to go tear up the downtown and all that? I hope we have demonstrated over the life of this project that we agree, and that this vote by the council was a really important one and a signal to the rest of us. We've stood behind this, and it goes into what we've supported in sewer projects and why we redid Peace Plaza. And when I was talking with Dr. Otley about the new project, the number one issue I had was animation at the street level. I put that down to say that the historic infrastructure of this town is really important, and we should stand by that. I would not support a sidewalk project in isolation. I would, however, support it if it was tied to the idea that the historic infrastructure of this town is about the buildings, but it's also about the street. And part of my job here is to say dangerous things, then get the hell out of town and do as quick as I can. So I'm going to say something, and you can all throw tomatoes, but the fact of the matter is, most cities that have skyways are trying to figure out how to have one level, not two. You have 3 levels here. My wife bought me one of my favorite pieces of clothes at Hanny's for Christmas. To find that in the Kaler is really difficult. To find out where their women's store is more difficult. Dr. Otley, when I went to that meeting about a month ago that you had over, I'm finding out which building it was in, but basically I felt like Little Red Riding Hood and somebody had stolen my breadcrumbs. I was going down corridors and this and that. The fact of the matter is, I believe the city needs to come to terms with the fact that 3 levels of navigation are never going to create a viable system. And I would like to explore the very dangerous idea of incentives that would tie bringing I'm going to call out Hanny's, others, up to the street level in these historic buildings. Peace Plaza should be lined with these incredible stores. Where do you find that smoothie shop? You know, the one I'm talking about, somewhere in those dark corridors? The fact of the matter is, it's a very difficult thing to navigate. I know I deal with this all the time, talking to people about bringing all the Skyway businesses in downtown Minneapolis to the street. But I believe we should be supporting pedestrian realm. I believe that should be tied to sidewalks that are pedestrian-oriented. If it's tied to an incentive program to animate the street, you've got more existing businesses than anything else. Just visualize this. If all of those came up to the street and that was tied together with coordinated marketing strategies that you do in special service districts, so you have a phenomenal opportunity, and I'd like us to bend as much as we possibly could to support that, as long as we came to the conclusion that if somebody's visiting Minnesota in the winter, we could either have them in the skyways that have light or the street that have light and connection to the indoors, rather than walking them through dark corridors on dark days.
Thank you for that. Others?
Now I'm ducking.
Now he's running.
No, I'm just ducking.
Just ducking. Okay, no tomatoes. All right. Do you have enough input?
I have more than enough input.
Well, I'd vote for
So-
double-decker businesses. Have them in
So
the
if-
basement for the subways and have them on the street for the folks on.
So if I could play back what I heard, though, in all seriousness, we're not asking you for formal action, I don't think, but we are hearing consensus around the idea that we should look for a way in which we could provide opportunities to support downtown properties. And I distinguish that from the kind of marketing and business support, which may also be necessary, but probably not within the realm of the DMC infrastructure tool chest. And that's where Jamie talks about other partners and the need for many partners working on this, and that the idea of supporting the commitment to historic infrastructure reflects really a commitment to a district and a commitment to an experience that we're trying to ensure prospers through the DMC initiative.
And I think there was something about sidewalks in there too. Just
There was
saying.
there was a lot said about sidewalks. I did not hear unanimity about sidewalks.
For those historic properties, we can qualify that
strategy.
as part of a broader strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I do think one of the things that might be helpful, Mr. Sieb, to lower the stress level of some of the individuals we're talking about here is a timeline on when you might be thinking of bringing this forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that we are committed to bringing something to you at the May meeting, your next formal meeting. And looking at Allison and Cindy and Jamie as the team members who will be building this out, but we would hope to be able to bring something by then.
Thank you. That's helpful. We do have one more item under this section.
Thank you. And with that, I'll introduce somebody who you already know, Deputy Administrator Cindy Steinhauser, who has been leading the Riverfront work. And we are really, you asked that we keep you abreast of the progress going on there. And that we just have a brief update, and I'll let Cindy provide that.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Good morning. Happy to be here. As Patrick said, excited to provide a brief Riverfront update. My comments and my update is really going to be focused on our parallel approach of how do we bring attention and interest to this space in the short term, and yet thinking about what we need to do to position it for long-term redevelopment and vitality, and really thinking about the relationship of this space and leveraging the energy and investment that's happening in the downtown area as well. So 3 key areas. So talking about pre-development infrastructure. Last summer we did some work to try and bring some color to the space, working in partnership with Rochester Arts Center and Threshold Arts to do some riverfront murals. We have plans underway for some alley activation in the space adjacent to the riverfront and a little bit onto the riverfront to, again, capitalize and take advantage of its proximity to downtown, to the UMR campus, and thinking about getting people down to the space and thinking about it a little bit differently. So alley activation that we expect to kick off in the spring. And then thinking about how we position and think about care of our asset. One of our greatest natural assets is Umbro River, and dredging that's going to be occurring, maintenance of the river over the next 2 years. Phasing capital improvements, we have updated numbers on the capital improvements from Gamble Associates. We asked them to take a look at it and break down the phasing in a couple of different options so that we can be responsive to both the financial cost and how that comes into play, as well as the timing and bringing on those capital improvements. We continue to do due diligence with the regulatory agencies, particularly the Corps of Engineers and DNR, and we're actively evaluating as funding opportunities at the state and federal level come forward forward and vetting this project and investment in this project through those federal opportunities and how we might capitalize on that, again, to leverage whatever other local and state dollars we're able to tap into. From a developer solicitation, we are still crafting the RFP. We are really thinking about market consideration. Our original intent was to bring a RFP out in Q4 of last year. We shifted that to Q1, and that was primarily in response to kind of what the market is doing. It seems to, while still challenging as compared to a year or two ago, as you saw in the numbers that Michael Flynn provided earlier, it's leveled off a little bit, and so how that plays into our developer solicitation. And we're evaluating, do we package it together, or do we package them individually? There are advantages to both strategies, right? The west site is a higher regulatory consideration, and yet it presents the greatest opportunity for public realm and activation and bringing people to the river and experiencing the river in a way that they've not experienced before. But the east side could move faster. It gives us greater density, to your comment, Member Williams. Greater density potentially could move faster. It's a larger site to support mixed development, and yet when you think about it in relationship to the west side, it certainly could assist the pro forma on the west side. So we're in those evaluations right now, and the expectation is that that comes out in yet this quarter. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions that you might have.
Thank you, and we can take questions. I do think one of the things that's in the packet talks about state bonding, and I think the governor's bonding proposal sends a little bit of a message to us that there may not be a huge interest in a lot of individual local bonds or capital investment projects going out, and I think that's impacting a little bit on how we're having to think about this and the timeline on it. Looks like he's going to be focused, of course there's executive and legislative branches, so we'll see where it goes, but focused on a much smaller $40 or $45 million, someplace in there, for local projects. So this may not be the year, and in fact I'm hearing, potentially several years out yet for some of the larger projects that we've been seeing like last year. So I think we need to keep that in mind too and try to see how we can best keep our projects moving ahead, understanding the political, landscape. Members, other comments or questions about this
I'll just
really
quickly
exciting piece?
say to Commissioner Tyne, who I know has river concerns, that we had a presentation by our Public Works staff about some of the water quality and flood management. And I don't know if Ms. Steinhauser wants to speak for staff, but we did hear that they're dredging and making sort of shaping so the river will flow better right there. So I don't know if you want to say, I asked them to provide a statement to the DMC board about it.
And I think for context, that is a place that was designed to pick up the sludge and an area that was meant to be dredged regularly. So yeah, it'd be great to have an update on that.
Sure, thank you, and I'll be happy to provide that too. We did receive something from Aaron Luckstein. I just received it late last night, so didn't forward it to the board yet. But we do have in our plan, as I mentioned, in the next 24 to 30 months, to do dredging of the river. We have to do it in conjunction with some other dredging projects because there's a very complex process in filing for that permitting and studying environmental impacts and relocation of wildlife and readying all the things necessary to do dredging. But what was really valuable in the presentation that Aaron Luckstein provided was understanding the river here, as you indicated, Mayor, is naturally flat, right? And so the flood wall control system is designed to take advantage of that. And I think there are, and we're happy to provide some, there are lots of examples where you can experience the river in high water or low water, and it still doesn't diminish it being a riverfront experience, it just, you experience it in a different way. And so certainly how we capitalize on still maintaining that important flood control system. There is natural sedimentation that happens there. Because of that, we last dredged in 2019, and again, it's on schedule in the next 24 to 30 months. But and we will use that as an opportunity to also do restoration of the natural vegetation, reestablish it, and kind of bring those enhancements to that project.
Other comments? Member Ryback.
Can I ask whether it is legal and advisable for us to also build recreation into that as one of the outcomes? I recognize from the education that all you guys have given me about the river that obviously there's great differences and all of that, but the ability to, when the flow is right, have ice skating on that the ability when it is possible to have paddleboarding on it. In this weird winter with no snow, there have been a couple days that have been fabulous clear ice on the city lakes. People come out from everywhere. So this doesn't have to be like all the time, but the ability to have recreation be an outcome in that allows you to look differently at how that's dredged, including creating paths for paddle boards and stuff. I know this sounds small, but the idea of using that river as a recreation amenity is stopped by the fact that recreation has not been at the table on outcomes. That's my understanding.
Sure, thank you for that. If I could just clarify, we did in our first couple of meetings with the Corps, did bring the plan and indicated recreation. Now, I don't know that we talked about winter recreation, I gotta be honest, but they were energized, and we didn't hear a no in that. It was just, what's the path forward? So thank you for those comments, and I will bring those back.
Super quickly, the winter one is based on what Ottawa does with its canal, where they let water in to a certain degree to have ice skating, so you can do that. But if you think about what a national attraction that would be, it would be a big deal.
And I think I hearken back to the original DMC photos, which had ice skating in that area down there too. So it was thought about at one point. Member time.
I just, I've been around here a long time. I don't recall that river freezing strong enough that you could safely ice skate on it, although if you broke through, you wouldn't drown because it's only about a foot.
You have wet skates.
Yeah.
Just wet.
So I'm heartened that you kind of looked at it as an east and west, because I can support DMC dollars going towards the east side of the site. I see it as a different river look, a different skyline look on the east side as compared to the west side. Whereas on the west side of the bottom right of this picture, if you're building on the right side there on the west side of the river, your view is not of the Rochester skyline. Your view is of the government center and a very shallow river that needs to be dredged probably twice as often as it is right now. I walk across that bridge today on the way to this meeting. It's not an attractive river. Yeah, I could just as well walk across the river. And this is following a year where we had a drought, so that we didn't have a whole lot of stuff coming down the river to settle out there. So you're right that part of the river is meant to settle out. That's great. But because of that, I don't think we are smart in putting public dollars into energizing the west site. It's not going to be, in my mind, it's not going to be an area where people are going to want to go and hang out. East side, if we could put dollars towards that, I can buy that.
I share some of your thoughts on that and concerns. Others? Artie?
I stand corrected on the ice skating, whether it works or not, but I do think maybe a look at Wausau could be an interesting example, because Wausau has taken a more natural look at the river. So to the really good point you're making about it being at different levels, that's cool with Wausau, because you can walk across it sometimes, and you can whitewater raft down it sometimes. So, I think they've understood the naturalization of the river better.
Member Carlson.
I'll just quickly say, as I contrast in perspectives from the mayor and Commissioner Tyne, the relationship between the historic district discussion and this discussion are so apt, because we're thinking about how to take some of the focus off our very busy Broadway and think about the assets that those historical buildings are on the other side, which does connect to the riverfront. So the idea of, for instance, one of those historic buildings shifting their storefront or having two storefronts, including facing the river, and really livening up that space with additional public investment in public amenities is incredibly exciting. The river may not be stunningly beautiful, but it is an asset that threads through our community with trails and connection points to many of the areas we're investing in. So I see it very differently, and just didn't want to not say my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I do know, as we were talking about housing over on the other side, there was some sports actually activation. I think there was a kayak landing or something in some of the designations there, so we can activate the water from either and probably both locations at some point. So that's great. Are you needing anything else? It looks, I don't see any hands up online. So we are nearing the end, but we're doing pretty well time-wise, but you do have a lot of, yeah, the current projects that you may want feedback on. So I don't know
Yeah,
how
thank
quickly
you.
you want to move into that.
Thank you for all of the feedback on the topics that we brought for discussion. We find it very helpful. We understand there's more work to be done in all of them, and we benefit from the time and attention that you give to these as we advance them so that we bring forward projects that meet your expectations. We do have, I'm losing all of my colleagues here. We
They're leaving you alone.
we do have attachments, further attachments. A lot of other work is going on, so we didn't present everything we're doing, and a lot of other things are going on. And so we give you the opportunity, if there's anything from the rest of the packet that you have questions on or would like some visibility, we have a few minutes to do that, and it's really at your pleasure.
Yeah, members, we have a few more minutes, and the packet does give updates on a number of the projects. I was particularly interested in the 2023 milestones at Chateau. Was a little surprised that almost 50% of the time they're free, public events that are free. That kind of surprised me, but very interesting data there. And have you had a chance to look it over, and does anybody have any comments or thoughts?
Just a
Yes,
question,
member.
Madam Chair, on just the West Transit Village. So are we waiting for federal funding approval? I mean, there's kind of a little bit of a chicken and an egg in terms of, is the transit going to get out there, and is the developer or the partnership kind of waiting for a stronger signal from that funding source, and/or is that something that needs to be catalyzed? I think you kind of referred to this earlier, Member Ryback.
Thank you. That's a project that you all are familiar with, and it's the west end of the transit line, and it's a partnership between Mayo Clinic, who owns the property, a private developer, Kraus Anderson, and DMC in the city. Lots of progress being made there. We expect to bring it back for more discussion and presentation at our May meeting, but lots of very good progress as it relates to that. And nobody's waiting for the federal funding to be codified before they work on it. People are working day and night on piecing it together, including the financial model, the housing opportunity, the public space amenities, and the retail components. Lots of work, great work going on there, and I expect we'll be ready for more public discussion at our next meeting.
And Madam Chair, if I can just follow up quickly. So again, in these economic times when everybody's trying to make everything pencil out, the affordability is what tends to get shoved to the side in order to get a project done. So I just want to keep that in front of us, and that we find ways to make sure that affordability remains, I mean, there wasn't a plan or a specific percentage or anything like that, but I just want to keep that on the table, because in tough economic times, we tend to push that off to the side in order to get the project done. Right. Just a comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I did have a question on Heart of the City, which I had hoped wouldn't be on here and that we would be completely done with that, but we're not, phase one anyway. Can you tell me where we stand on it looks like the lighting just for public, transparency is expected to be this spring?
Yeah.
Is that still on? And then the pavers, if you could give us an update on where you stand with that?
Sure, absolutely. So a couple of things. The catenary lighting system is going to be installed, believe me, and the poles that hold it up were installed last fall, and it's really trying to find the right window between all of the events going on, because it can be a bit disruptive. So the poles were installed last fall, and it is now ready for the lighting system to be installed. Meanwhile, this past fall and winter, there was a pretty dramatic lighting of the trees throughout Peace Plaza, which, if you haven't seen that, I think you will find that quite mesmerizing and quite delightful. That was an added initiative that I think turned out quite well. The paving system, we continue to try to document and understand some of the shifting of the pavers that are going on, and how to rectify that in a more permanent solution. Work is going on with that. And then there is the raised art lettering, which is the pavers that have the art piece with a slight elevation. And we feel like we want to find a way to reconcile that art piece with ease of navigation. And so we're working with the artists and the designers and city colleagues in trying to figure out solutions for that. So they're top of mind for us, and we see those as moving ahead this year.
Thank you, and I
This will
appreciate-
be, I'm sorry, just
go
to
ahead.
add, as we heard earlier discussion about the Unbound project, Mayo Clinic has established a standard, at least from Dr. Ferrugia, that they want to position their property redevelopment in a way that their customers don't experience the messiness of construction. And they are going to be repositioning the primary entrance to the Gonda campus on the east side, so on what is Annenberg Plaza. And so the importance of the east side of their campus is going to become even more significant during this construction phase, as the west side will be disrupted during the expansion and construction model.
Wonderful. I think that's good to highlight. And I did want to also thank you for mentioning the lights. For folks who don't live in town or haven't been here recently, the addition of the lights downtown in the winter months has really, it's beautiful. And we've heard a lot of positive feedback about that. So.
And you brought up Chateau, and I would just say, I think it really is settling into a very successful pattern. It was quite busy and occupied and used throughout the holiday season and into the new year. So I think we're beginning to see a pattern emerge around the use of Chateau.
Awesome.
That's good news.
Wonderful. And are there any other comments or questions from anyone? We're winding down here, and I don't see anything, so I think-
Madam Chair, just to note a procedural question, if
Of
I
course.
might, before we adjourn. As you know, under our statute, if there are remote participants by board members, we need to state on the record the reason for it. It could be a scheduling conflict or they're out of town, and so perhaps this would be a good time to do that.
That would be great. I know one of our members has either been kicked off or fallen off, but maybe we could address that.
Certainly, and I think you're speaking about Chair Wheelock, and I know that she was out of town, and that's why she had to participate remotely.
Thank you. Member Baker?
Down also.
Okay, out of town. Last but not least, Jim?
Out of town.
Member Campbell, thank you so much. So 3 members are out of town, but took the time. Thank you so much for joining us and assuring we have a quorum. And so we needed to just make an announcement about the meeting schedule. It's on your agenda. The executive committee will meet March 14th at 1 p.m. And the next regular meeting of this group is May 23rd at 9:30 a.m. And it says that it will be at the Hilton, Rochester Mayo Clinic area Hilton.
That's
across
correct.
the Skyway.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And so unless I have anyone that has an objection, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for the support on the
Yeah, yeah.
art project.
Thanks.
Not beautiful.